Good day
Good
and
day
welcome
and welcome
to
to
the episode of
episode of
Talk.
Talk.
I am
I
one of
am
the
one of the
Shaina
famous
from the
artists from
Virgin
the Virgin
Islands.
Islands.
With me
With me
tonight, I
tonight, I
have
have
Miss Shirley
Miss Shirley
Osborne.
Osborne.
We're giving
We're giving
apologies to
apologies
Chris,
to
who is
Chris,
not
who is
available
not
tonight,
available
but
tonight,
we
but
are
we
looking
are looking
forward
forward
to a very
to a very
interesting and
interesting and
engaging
engaging
conversation
conversation.
where we are continuing to inform and unite our OT family. So with us tonight, we have one of our sister OTs coming in from the Turks and Caicos Islands, and we will go right into it. One pause real quick. Of course, we have to thank our media partners around the Caribbean who have partnered with us to take the message out. So we'd like to thank, starting off with K1 Marl Road Facebook page, Montserrat ZJB Radio, Virgin Islands CBN Radio FM 90.9, as well as Bermuda's Channel 82, Radio Saba PJFE FM 93.9, and Barbados CBC Channel 8. Thank you guys again for partnering with us on this journey. So Shirley, how are you? How's your week been?
It was good. How was yours?
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
We had our
mess
days
past
week,
yeah,
and then
and then we're back to work tomorrow. Yeah. Oh, hold on.
All right.
So
tonight
is
a street drop. We're happy to have it back. The Honorable Kyle Moons, MP from the Turks Caicos Islands. Good evening, Honorable. How are you?
I am good. Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. Great. So
Great.
for those who
may not have
seen you were
last,
please go ahead and
introduce yourself.
My name is Kyle Knowles. I am the Member of Parliament in the Turks Caicos Islands for Electoral District 10, Wheeling and West Caicos, and I currently serve as a member of a number of committees in the House of Assembly, as well as within various ministries across government. So for a backbencher, I'm quite busy.
Great. So we started a series when we kicked off. We started a series at the beginning of this new season where we're going around the OTs and talking to different persons about what's happening in their islands. So I know you're prepared to share with us tonight a lot of the current affairs. I think all the OTs have been pretty busy. So we've checked off the Virgin Islands and Montserrat. So for persons who may have missed that, you can visit our Facebook page as well as our YouTube channel to see those past episodes. So I'm looking forward to learning about what's been happening in TCI tonight.
Oh, well, thank you very much for that. And TCI has definitely been going over a lot of leaps and bounds these last few years, with us being the government in power or the government of the day. Most recently, we would have launched our national housing policy because what we would have found in our case is that we don't have sufficient housing because we're moving at such an economically fast pace. Home ownership is now a mechanism by which we need to, or a gap, I would say, that we need to fill quite relatively quickly, based on the number of Turks and Caicos Islanders returning home, wanting to move out on their own, and the like. So the housing policy currently speaks to how we plan to address it in the short and long term, and we're quite optimistic that we will definitely be able to fill those gaps for our people. Um, and I hope that in a subsequent interview, the Minister of Infrastructure for Turks and Caicos will have an opportunity to dive a bit deeper into what that would look like. But what I can speak to at the moment is that my very own constituency, um, I've been very busy. I've been very busy, and most times when you hear a politician say to persons that they're busy, it's almost busy doing what, right? I'm one of those individuals that tends to be very much so hands on. So I can attest to probably about 3 weeks ago, I would have held a co-ed summer camp because again, one of the things that that I'm focused on is making sure that the needs of the children in in my constituency are met, and to create wholesome, clean environments for them to be who they are. So I would have had a summer camp for the second time this year, and when you think about the topic of youth, it takes on so many different narratives. So why not take the bull by the horns and change the narrative in my very own constituency? And that's what I plan to do. Sorry. Um, I've also been aggressively moving in the area of just of establishing basic infrastructure. There are times when we look at modern housing or modern infrastructure of modern developments, and we in our pace we need to look and we need to make sure that everyone um, is able to feel a part of what's happening. So what I've been doing is working along with the government and the private sector in making sure that there is adequate water, city lines, because of course, the days of having water cisterns or water tanks, in some countries, those are still viable or those are still options. So for me, creating that element of making sure that there is sufficient or adequate access to city water, proper lighting in the constituency, proper roads in the constituency. And I say basic infrastructure because the area of Wheeling doesn't have a private sector model that the other sister constituencies would have. So we are still in the process of creating or attracting the kind of development that we would deem necessary for our success. So just to not to get too deep, that's just some of the things at this moment that I'm kind of spearheading, and making sure that we are able to address the needs of people, on a more intimate basis.
Okay, great. So you sent us a PowerPoint. So I don't know if you want to start to get into those topics. We can go right
Okay,
into
if okay, so the for those persons who might not be familiar, the image in the front of us now is the Turks and Caicos flag. Of course, off to my left or your right would be the Union Jack, primarily because we're still a British overseas territory. But the crest that is to my right is symbolic to Turks and Caicos because it is the Turk's head cactus, the queen conch, and the spiny lobster. All of these symbols are what you would find in abundance in the Turks and Caicos Islands. So for those persons who would be familiar with Grand Turk, Salt Key, the Turks Islands, because of the 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 makeup of those islands, you would find an abundance of those of those cactuses there, or cacti
yeah.
there. In the For South Caicos, for example, South Caicos is known as the fishing capital of the Turks and Caicos because of its natural deep water. So we would have had the lobster season open up August 1st, which should have been last week.
That's great. Mhm.
Um, I can tell you, I think the largest haul we had was about 1,895 pounds of just lobster,
Wow.
and that's just for South Caicos. So you can imagine across the islands, some brought in 1,600, some brought in 1,100. So you can tell that the abundance of lobster is definitely there. And the same for the conch, the queen conch. Um, all of these are symbolic to Turks and Caicos, and um, we take pride in it, as we should. If we can go to the next slide.
So these are private fishermen, or is this a government?
These are all private fishermen. These are all
Okay.
private fishermen. So what they would do is once they would have gotten their catch for the day, we have what we would call the fish markets, or where they would go and they would sell their produce to them based
Uh-huh.
on the quantity, the dollar value at that time. I think the last time I checked, it was somewhere around $20 a pound.
Mhm.
So fair enough. If you bring in 1,800 pounds a day at $20 a pound, some good money.
Pretty good. Mhm.
So the chart that you would see in the front of you now is technically what the election cycle looks like at this moment. So with the yellow dots would speak to the current political party, which is the Progressive National Party, the party that I'm a part of. In the last election of 2001, we took home 14 of the 15 seats across the country.
Mhm.
The black dots would be the governor's appointed members. The
Mhm.
governor of the Turks and Caicos also has two appointed members. One would be the attorney general, and the other would be the appointed member for the opposition.
Okay.
Okay. And then, of course, the speaker and the clerk.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
So as it stands, our government has resoundingly has a resounding presence in the House of Assembly to date.
Okay.
Okay.
And this, in terms of the government appointment, I think I recall that happening after the suspension of the Constitution. This was one of those constitutional changes that was made fresh.
So what we have now is where apart from separately from the previous election style, what we have is what we call at-large candidates. So there are 5 at-large candidates. Those
Okay.
5 at-large candidates um, run countrywide.
Mhm.
So those 5 and the 10 constituency seats make up the 15 persons vying for seats in the House of Assembly.
Okay.
And what I think is good to mention is that even with winning such a large margin, we also have an appointed member as well as the opposition as an appointed member. I think that was
Okay.
the one seat that I was missing, along with the clerk, the and 2 governors appointed members. So all
Okay.
of those persons being appointed and elected by the people make up the House of Assembly.
Okay. And that's a total of 21 seats.
Correct.
Good. Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
So for many persons who might not be familiar, the previous photo was, well, I'll deal with the one in the front right now.
Wait, hold on.
This,
You're gonna do this one?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
I went too fast. Okay, go ahead.
So the photo currently being seen is the visit with myself and the Honorable Sean Malcolm, who's the current Minister of Health, to the island of Anguilla, another OT.
Mhm.
That was in March of this year. The purpose of the visit was to really was to have oversight of the medical facilities, the polyclinics that they would have established in Anguilla, as
Mhm.
well as to visit the solid waste facilities. One of the issues that we are faced with in Turks and Caicos at the moment is the solid waste facilities, which falls within my constituency as well, where I currently serve as the chairman of the solid waste task force. And the objective was to really look at best practices and to see what, from those best practices, what could have been implemented in the short and medium term back here in Turks and Caicos.
Mhm.
One of the amazing things that came out of the trip was that the former governor of Anguilla is now the current governor of Turks and Caicos, And
Okay.
with that visit, we were able to go over to the French side of St. Martin to also carry out a site visit at their solid waste facility as well. And while persons might say, well, you're going to look at a solid waste facility, there are so many things that there are so many spin-off factors that comes when persons discard of their trash.
Mhm.
There's so many ideas and creative opportunities that come about. So it was just an opportunity to see and to come back and work on the necessary framework here in Turks and Caicos to right size our solid waste management issues that we face today.
Okay.
Mhm.
Sounds as if you guys have a similar challenge to us, as we've also been experiencing, in terms of sustainable management of it. I think it was last year.
Yeah.
Our Minister of Health at the time, he visited Bermuda
Okay.
to talk to them about what they were doing there. So it's
Mhm.
definitely good to, do the research amongst ourselves to see what we can learn from each other. So that's great.
Of course, because again, at the end of the day, because of the way because of our geographical alignment, sometimes, and the environmental impact that these sites have on many of us, and I'm sure many of us lean towards tourism as a major part of our economic stability. It really plays a part in that space as well.
Hmm.
But for many persons who would have not had an opportunity to visit Turks and Caicos, of course, Turks and Caicos being an archipelago of islands, and what we see before us now is just a geographical map of the Turks and Caicos Islands. A funny story: about 2 weeks ago, we held the 45th CPA conference, and one of our delegates was looking at a map of Providenciales, to be correct, and didn't realize that we were not in North Caicos. So we
Okay.
had to really, paint that picture. Like, this is where you are.
Hmm.
It takes you a boat ride, 20 minutes to get to North Caicos. Grand Turk being the capital, the House of Assembly is in Grand Turk. So where you would see the multicolor orange, yellow, blue, and green, this is Providenciales, which would be known as the economic hub or economic capital of the country. And if you look over to your right, where there's the red and green, that's Grand Turk. Grand
Hmm.
Turk is the capital of the country. So we fly from Providenciales to Grand Turk for House of Assembly meetings.
Okay.
Yes,
So you
so
you have a commute.
yes, we have a commute.
All right. Well, that's good to know, because I'm sure, yeah, sometimes we don't know, especially these island chains that we have,
Hmm.
that the same thing here in the Virgin Islands, as far as, it's many of us.
Yes, yes. So this next slide here is a slide of I had an opportunity to bring brief remarks at the PNP conference in Jamaica last year at their at their national convention. Again,
Hmm.
it was a wonderful opportunity. And again, as a young politician, it's always good to have an opportunity to have dialogue with your counterpart across the region. Sometimes we understand that no matter the size of our countries, we might be faced with the same issues.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, it really depends on having the kind of network that is necessary, and having the kind of team and support to really navigate your way through some of the national issues that we may face.
Yeah.
This here is a picture of myself, um, my comrade, famous, and my colleague, Senator Quentin Lightbourne, with the party leader of the PNP in Jamaica. Again, all of us who had an opportunity to bring remarks on behalf of our various governments. And again, coming from a country whose population is roughly about 45, 50,000, when you get into an arena as the one we were in, and you're able to speak to 4,000 people all at once, I can tell you it's breathtaking. You get behind the podium and you take a deep breath because you don't know when that's going to happen again. So you take it all in. But again, we were grateful for the opportunity to create long-lasting friendships. We were
We
there.
were there.
Okay.
Okay.
Shirley, you have
Shirley,
any
you have any
questions?
question?
Yeah, I was waiting for him to move along further, but yeah, I have a couple of questions about. I mean, earlier when you spoke, Honorable Knowles, about constitutional arrangements, I'm really interested in asking questions about that. So I was going to let you get through this piece first, because what I'm interested in, among other things, is understanding, getting a feel for your relationship, the Turks and Caicos Island relationship with the British government, considering what's your recent history, should I put it that way? And now that there's a request, the inquiry about our thoughts about the constitutional arrangements, I was just kind of wondering, I'm curious about what Turks and Caicos is thinking about where that's concerned.
Well, it's kind of a two-sided coin. There are some of us who would want to lean towards independence, and then there are others who would want to lean towards self-determination. I think at this moment, the relationship that we have with the British government, while there's always room to have a better relationship, I think we have made significant inroads with them. And I think that's really been because over the last few years, we've been agitating a bit more. And I think even through UCOTA, where I think our premier currently is the chair, having those frequent talks, having those frequent lines of communication, agitating for constitutional changes. And I think that's something that we've done as of late. We've been really making significant progress in that vein. I think when we think about our history, I think while we have to appreciate our history, I always think that the generation coming up behind you, in particularly, I think it's important to know from whence we came, because sometimes we jump on bandwagons and we make noise about issues that we're not well briefed on. I think one of the things that I've personally experienced is having a better understanding of what that relationship was coming into politics. Now, for me, I have my views as to what I believe is going forward. I think that Turks and Caicos understanding what has transpired over the last few years with constitutional suspension, with the current advancement that we would have made, I think we've done everything necessary to move forward, right? And again, I think from what I would do is I always have this conversation with my colleagues. I think it's really about educating our populace as to what those two options look like, and having our people, not just us as politicians, make that decision. Because even if the decision is ours at the end of the day, the people whose lives are going to be impacted by it must also feel and must also have total buy-in. There must be total buy-in at the end of the day, because the level of responsibility given to us is not to be taken lightly.
Yeah, I'm really curious about that, because in Montserrat, that's a big issue, not just because of what's coming up now, but just because of geopolitics and the way the world works, and people's notions nowadays about ownership of self, land history, and all that kind of stuff. So I was really interested in that. I've been to Turks and Caicos a couple of times, and yeah, I remember landing there and thinking, because you're so close to the United States, because of the history you've had, which is very different in many ways to Montserrat's. It's and because your geography, your topography is so much different to Montserrat's. I am really just curious about how all of these play into how people feel about themselves in terms of autonomy. We're talking about self-determination and independence and so on. And in Montserrat, for example, we're not talking about independence. We're talking about self-determination, internal self-government, having the right, having the not just the right, but actually being able to administer ourselves in the ways that we like, that we think suit us. And so right now we are looking at understanding what the people, so you talk about not just what the politicians want, but what the people want. And I'm kind of curious about, and I'm curious about this for BDI also, and Bermuda and everybody else. So I'm looking to see what comes up, what the submissions are in September about this. But something else you talked about here, which I'm interested in too, you talked about the shortage of housing, and you talk about so many people returning home. Tell me about that. Because one of the things that everybody's struggling with is people leaving, especially young people.
So of course, the Turks and Caicos, post-COVID, there was a significant influx of tourists coming to the country and what have you. Again, not every tourist coming to the country wanted to stay at your traditional resort. So you found that the villa market picked up and persons wanting to have their own space, and the like. So what we found is that the residential home or persons with apartment complexes were now transforming them into Airbnb or VRBO. So when you think about now persons coming home or persons looking for affordable housing, for long-term affordable housing, that is, those options started to dwindle. Because now, if I were charging you $1,000 a month for rent, I could make $1,000 in a week, with less headache, and quicker turnaround time. So then we've seen a significant leap jump in that aspect. Now, that's also coupled with the fact that persons who would have been living abroad would want to now come back home and want their independence, not wanting to live under the same roof as their parents. So now, some time ago, there was a development, a low cost or affordable home development that provided just that opportunity. Here we are now in 2023, not having that option available at the moment. Hence, the thrust behind the housing policy was such a significant, was done with such significance, because it was really looking at how do we place our people, how do we create ownership, how do we stabilize and create these opportunities to keep our people home? Because the last thing you want, persons move for a number of reasons, but I think one of the things you don't want them moving for is because they don't have a place to live. So looking at it holistically, we wanted to move as quickly as we could have to remedy the problem. And again, it's not an overnight fix, and there will be bumps in the road. And of course, any responsible government will do what they need to do and do what they must to make sure that their citizens benefit. The plus size to it is that the majority of the land available is in my constituency. So I always tout that to my colleagues. So my constituency is one choice to have a boom in development outside of the tourism industry. So I'm also mindful. I said, listen, if we're going to do it, we must do it right, because we need to have properly developed subdivisions to make sure that the different scales of housing. We need to make sure that the various persons, the elderly, the disabled, all of these various categories, that housing is available to everyone. So we've looked at it. We've looked at it properly, and now we're in the stages of seeing it to fruition. So we're trying our best.
Thank you, Shaina. I have a couple more questions, but you can go.
We'll let it finish.
Yeah, go through the presentation, then we'll come back to those. You come up with those.
Okay. Yeah. More stuff, but that's all good time to recognize our sponsors or media partners. Sorry. Giving them a shout out. Thank you to Cayman Marl Road, Montserrat, ZJB Radio, Virgin Islands, CBN Radio, FM 90.9, Bermuda's Channel 82, Radio Saba, FE FM 93.9, and Barbados is CBC Channel 8. All right, so let's pull back up the presentation. and finish up a few slides. So what do we have going on here? Honorable, you're muted.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay. Yeah. So you have to start
the,
over.
the picture, yes, the picture that you see before you is the summer camp that I would have held in early July 9th, the week of the 9th. And we had about 40 kids each day, coming out wanting to be a part of the activities that we had going on. And there's actually a basketball court or a park right in the one of the neighboring communities, because I believe that communities need to utilize the facilities that are there set out for them. Sometimes governments make these investments and these investments aren't functional. So let's utilize them. Long story in the background, one of the kids told his mother that he's tired of being in the house. He wants to play basketball sometimes when it's cooler in the evening. So a little kid sends me a message on Instagram asking me what I'm going to do. So when I got this message from this probably 13, 14-year-old, it caused me to get into action. And ironically, as we were at the summer camp, the power company pulled up and started to install the lights on the park. So that was something, that was really impactful, because it as simple as lights may seem, it does a lot. It changes the aesthetics of things. You can go to the next slide. So what we have here is the beginning of the water line installation. Water line installation that has been long awaited by a number of citizens in. This is the water line installation that has been long awaited by a number of persons in my community. I believe it goes to some 1,000 and 1,500 feet of pipe. So it's quite extensive. And what it does, like, again, it just changes the outlook on their current living conditions. So it just helps, basic infrastructure, like I've said at the onset. These are the things that we like to that I'm focused on in helping to change lives in my community. Okay, you can go to the next slide.
So as an engineer, I am guessing because of the limestone that you guys can dig deep trenches.
Oh yeah.
This is as deep as it's gonna get, and then you're gonna cover it over, right?
Yes, you got it. You got it. Quite correct.
Yeah, you have an engineering challenge. We have it really easy here compared.
Okay. Just another photo of the summer camp.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the court and everything. Looks nice.
So this picture, it goes back to last year actually. At the current dump site, there was a fire, a fire that lasted, I think, about 3 days. Mm-hmm. It was, for me, I would say it was life-changing, because it showed me a lot of gaps that we have, in our solid waste management, and it allowed me to be able to address things with a bit more, to address things as they should. So myself, along with one of the staff members from the environmental health department, and one of the captains of the TCI regiment, just taking out a drone shot so he could show me the extent of the damage, because some of the areas were so heavily damaged that we couldn't get through. So it just helped us to have an aerial shot so that we could make the necessary assessments, and sending in the proper equipment to help us execute in that space.
So do you guys incinerate, or is it strictly landfill?
It's strictly landfill. What happened was what happened. Some
incinerating happens, but it's very small scale and it's just for medical waste at the moment.
Okay.
But I think with the current model that we are looking at, we're going to capture a number of things. So from the onset, there'll be a level of sorting because we need to sort trash prior to coming in. Then breaking things down prior to the landfill. But from then to now, we've made significant steps, slowly but surely, because again, as you make those steps, you have the element of construction waste, residential waste, all of these things coupled coming in at the rate that they are, it's just it became a compounding problem. So
Yeah.
it's really been a challenge, but a challenge that we've dedicated ourselves to remedying as quickly as we can.
Okay. Yeah, because we have an incinerator, but we also have the landfill for those items that can't be incinerated. Currently the incinerator isn't working because of a similar situation. There was a fire and it was damaged. I think this was early last year. So it's been some time now. We're waiting for parts so that they can be repaired. But in the meantime, now, everything is going up into the landfill. But we do have those fires that you talk about sometimes that happen.
Yeah.
And, it's something. I live in the west end of the Virgin Islands. So, on Tortola, downwind of the landfill. So,
yes.
People. I know the horrors of the smoke. So it's something where I feel their pain on that one for sure.
I don't want to say glad. I don't want to say that I'm glad that someone knows that what I'm going through, but it's it's good.
Yeah, it's quite a bit of a challenge because I realize, especially for us as small islands, there's only so much real estate that we have. So it's really important, I think, that, in terms of the design and engineering, when we try to come up with solutions, that there are things that are sustainable. And that's one of the things where we're looking at, where do we need to pivot? Because the landhill on the hillside, is it, we don't have unlimited hillside to do this on. And then you have the issue of, where do you get the dirt from to cover up the trash and all of these other things that go along with it. So it's a thing where people just wish, you didn't have to deal with it. You throw your trash out and then it disappears. But that is so far from the reality that it's really, I think, a big challenge for us here in the Caribbean period. And we probably need to really be, like you said before, consolidating our resources, looking at what each other is doing and how we can work together probably on this, because it's a problem for everybody.
Yeah, because
what do you guys do in Montserrat, Shirley? You have a landfill?
Yeah, we have a landfill. We don't have an incinerator, but there is what I term controlled burns.
Okay.
They light the thing up and just.
You guys have control burns.
Well, I call it control. I don't know what they officially call them, but because it's not. It's out in the open. They cover some. They burn some. And again, we have the issue of it doesn't get sorted. So literally, it's everything just goes into the same pile. And we have the same problem as you, Shaina, in that it's on a hill. It's on a hill. The only thing that's the only quote unquote saving grace at the moment is that it's in a part of the island where nobody lives, and so there's nobody downwind of it really. But it's also in land which we will probably need to develop to have people live very shortly, because the south of the island, as you know, is not available. I know the government's looking for solutions, but it's tough. We just don't have the space. It's tough. It's really tough.
Okay, so that's
go ahead.
No, I was going to say that
presentation. So
you could pivot now to anything else you want to follow up on.
I have a question. I'm really interested in understanding how you're dealing now with. I haven't looked recently, but I'm interested in how you're dealing with the issue of migration. I know it's been a problem over the last few years. How is that going?
It continues to be a challenge. It continues to be a challenge because of what is happening in Haiti, and again, there's not a one size fit all process that we have. we're doing our best with the resources that we have, and and to be quite frank with you, because of the migration concerns, we've entered into a number of MOUs with the Bahamas and the U.S. government to help us in this fight. Ship riders agreement where an officer from the Bahamas and an officer for Turks and Caicos can ride on the necessary ships in spotting these sloops. With the U.S. Coast Guard having surveillance, I think in our last budget cycle, the British government funded a actual surveillance plane for us, so that we can have aerial surveillance and what have you. It's one of those things that, because of our size and the proximity that with us to the northern side of Haiti, it's scary in the sense that when you think about the millions of persons that reside in Haiti and where we are, and not having not having the necessary resources and having to at times wait for help. It really keeps you on edge sometimes. But again, what we've done this year with our budget is we've invested heavily into border services, the acquisition of more boats, the acquisition of merging our customs and immigration to a border force, so it gives us more officers that are agile and flexible to move in the event that there is a crisis. But again, as you assess on a case by case basis, you'll make the necessary adjustments that you would see fit. But again, when you hear about a sloop coming in, you just don't know what to expect. You don't know what to expect, because you can have anywhere from 50 people to 250 people. And it really puts us a burden and a strain on us as a small OT. So again, when you talk about relationships with the United Kingdom, you would have hoped that while the resources are available to them, that they would have a greater understanding of the kind of help that we need, in combating this problem. Because again, people will try to paint so many different narratives, but at any point that a country of our size feels threatened, as an OT, you would hope that the proper resources and manpower would be properly assembled to help us fight in this resolve. Because imagine catching a slave, bringing them in to the mainland, and then having to repatriate these persons. That's quite costly. I think in the last year we paid some $4 million, if I stand to be corrected, in just repatriation. So it's one of those things that's just an ongoing process. And as a member of parliament, I continue to support my government and the necessary enforcement agencies as they fight this battle, because it's one of those things you just don't know when it's going to stop.
Yeah, it's one of those unfortunate historic things that those started way before our time, and they probably be going on. And you get frustrated. I mean, I know I do. I get frustrated at the way geopolitics creates these problems for us, and then the support to resolve them just is not forthcoming. Montserrat has we have border issues too, because of the southern part of the island, which is uninhabited. We hear stories about boats coming and landing and people picking up and dropping off all kinds of things. I walk on the beach sometimes, and my fear is that I see a packet. I hope I don't see a box that I'm not supposed to see anyway. So there are those issues that create all kinds of problems. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, though, is in the context of migration, people coming and going. How do young people feel about you're a young man, this is your first time in office, right? First time in the house?
Yes.
How do young people feel about politics and government and the relationship between the territory and the United Kingdom? And of interest to me too is you're so close to the US. how do they feel about the relationship with the US? And another piece of that question is, Shaina, and listen to this. So I think I sent you this clipping. Somebody sent me a clipping a couple of days ago about the migrants coming out of Africa into England, into Europe. And there's a notice there's an article, I can't remember which newspaper, a couple of days ago, about Britain considering sending them off to the overseas territories. Of course, everybody's antenna went up because we have, quote unquote, so much space. Our population is so low that they're thinking of sending, instead of sending them to Rwanda, they're going to send them. They could send them to Montserrat, but we're too close to the US. I say we're too close to the US, so they won't send them to the Caribbean at all. But how do young people feel about these relationships? How do they feel about these things that are going on in the world around them?
It's wow, that's a loaded one, right? So let me show how I'll break it down. Young people in Turks and Caicos are politically inclined. They are aware of what a government should do, and the level of responsibility that government has to its people. I think the issue that persons or young people have is in the government systems are not as robust as they would like it to be. So I think that brings a level of frustration, because again, you're talking about persons who would have gone to school in the United Kingdom, school in the US, so they're accustomed to things happening instantaneously, not having to do with bureaucracy on a very small scale. Prime example. Unfortunately, we had a problem with our police record, right? So in the past, when I have to say the past, a police record would have taken you up to 3 to 4 months to get a police record. Where we are now, you can get your police record in 24 hours. So we're understanding that, you know, we need to modernize and we need to beef up some of our processes. As far as young people getting into the political arena, I think they're not so much inclined in doing that. I think young people of today want a government that will make sure that their needs are taken care of and opportunities are made available to them. I think for me, it's twofold. I think that people need to not be so much reliant on government for everything. I think when the government does make policies to aid avenues, I think it's your responsibility as a citizen to take advantage of it to make it work and not expect the government to spoon feed you, right? Because that is another mindset or culture that we are currently faced with. Being a British overseas territory is one thing, but being Americanized is another thing. What you'll find is that there's a clash between the system of being Americanized, because everyone goes to Miami, goes to the United States. We've only in the last 7 to 8 years really been going to the United Kingdom, right? So it's only in recent times that we've really been tapping into whatever those benefits of being a British territory citizen, whatever availed. So it's one of those scenarios where we're trying to wean them away from becoming so much Americanized, exploring the region a bit more, taking advantage of opportunities in the United Kingdom, but understanding that once you would have obtained these experiences, gotten the exposure, gotten the education, come back home and help us implement. Because sometimes, yes, it's frustrating when you come home and you don't have access to capital to carry out your business, right? But the only way we're going to know is if you come, you test the system, we understand that there are flaws, and the onus is on us as government and legislators, sorry, to make the necessary adjustments. And I can tell you that is exactly what we've been doing. So I think the level of engagement could always be better because there's always room for improvement. but I believe that our government has made significant strides in that vein. We have what we have here is an agency called Invest Free that deals with the MSME program. They just opened up a business support unit, and that's really to help the current entrepreneurs who would have tapped into the grant system to help them keep their businesses afloat. Because the last thing you want to do is just get a plan, give them the funding. Within a year, the business is non-functional. That's not. We need to think long term. Okay, job creation, becoming entrepreneurs, spin-off factors, what those things would look like. So we know what we want. I think we just need to be intentional about how we manage our time and how we get to the next level. I was listening to someone this week, and he said, every time he starts a project, he says he gets inspired to do another project. But what he realizes is that in that moment of inspiration, he never finishes what he started. So sometimes we need, even with that happening, I think, and even with the demand that's placed on us to the government, sometimes managing those measurable practice will lead to make the outcome for the benefit
Shaina, I'm getting so much feedback here. Can you hear me?
I'm hearing you.
Yeah.
I think his telecom connection seems to be going in and out, but we do have days. I dropped a note in the chat to let persons know, this is one of those common problems we have regionally with internet. So telecom isn't cooperating with us tonight at all. But I think persons would have been hopefully hearing his explanation. And I think, he made a very significant point. You made a significant point, Honorable, in talking about the influences on our local culture. Because I know for us, I'm in my 40s, and I know when, we started to get cable and, the American influence, infiltrated. And then for the most part, like you said, we went to college in the US. Even before that, persons would migrate to the US for work, job opportunities. So it's something that this has been happening over the last several generations. And I think, we're in a place now where we have to start to look at defining our local identity amidst all these external or foreign influences, which we sometimes don't have any control over, because with the UK, that wasn't under our control whether or not we were British territory. But now going forward, in terms of our relationship in global politics, period, it's something that this generation now, as well as the one that's to come, has to understand how are we going to forge our way forward. And it starts with us understanding who we are and where we want to go.
And I think we need to have more of those conversations. I think with government and having cultural departments, in that aspect, I think we need to be more intentional, because I think sometimes, because of the heavy influence of other cultures, you can lose your weight. And that's me as a young individual saying this. I have a 5-year-old. And sometimes I watch and I listen to what she has to say, and I'm like, but I don't remember she has enough. It's just the influence of television and the internet
and the internet,
all these different factors, and there's only so much we can do, to protect and to guide them from it. I can tell you this: you can put as much lock as you want on those devices. These kids today, they'll break through.
And that's where, again, teaching them how to analyze and apply, because it's something we say in the islands: you eat the fish and spit out the bones. So it's not, the whole fish isn't good for you, because it could injure you, if you want to swallow a bone. So it's something where now we have to teach them how to process all this information that sometimes is misinformation, one. And then, how does this apply to us? What do we do with this, in terms of our betterment? How do we empower ourselves with the information that we have and, put ourselves in a better position than we are? Because there's so much going on in the region, in addition to the world stage. Sometimes it's really depressing to watch the global news now. So I have to moderate my intake at times, because it sets me thinking in terms of how is this going to affect us? How is this going to affect the region? Because we're not islands isolated anymore from what is happening elsewhere in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
At the conference that we had 2 weeks ago, one of the things that came up was food security and what that looks like for the region. And that was a topic that it got so intense that we had to stop, because you have all of these Caribbean countries with with different population sizes, with different demands, different levels of skill set. Like everyone had a different approach, and I think that's definitely one of the conversations that needs to be had on a wider spectrum across the region, because it's something that we need to take into consideration more with more intent, because with the current war in Ukraine, persons should look at that on the news and be like, oh, that's not affecting us. Yes, it is. Some persons might have never heard about Ukraine before until this war, So we
or understand how important they are to the global food chain, because this whole notion right now about the green exports, and that is one of the products that if you read any box, almost it's an ingredient that's in there. So it is very integral for us to pay attention to these things, and the trickle down effect. Sometimes it's slow in coming, but eventually it will impact us and it hits home. So
my whole perspective changed after COVID, because when we heard about COVID in its initial stages, everyone was just saying, "Oh, it's in China," and then it got to Washington State. You were like, "Oh, it's just in Washington," and then it got to the Midwest, and then you heard it was in Florida, and it was like, okay.
And by then it was already in the region, and
then it was in the region. You were like, now hold on, So it like you said initially, you sometimes you watch the news to stay abreast of regional affairs, international affairs, and the likes, but you have to manage your intake, because it can
feel overwhelming sometimes. It can be.
Honorable Knowles, I have one quick question for you. I know we're about to wrap up, Shane. I see the message. One quick question for you about food security, because one of my frustrations is that we talk about food security, and it seems when politicians talk about that, we talk in terms of pounds, in terms of amount. But one of the things that is really beginning to cause me deep concern is the quality of the food that we get. Because for me, it's not enough just to have enough. If you have enough and it's only sugar water, it's not going to do any good. If it's just white flour, it's not going to do any good. And I'm, what's at that meeting, where they talk, what came up about food security that can sort of give an idea what we are thinking in terms of nutrition, rather than just belly full.
No, that was exactly what we were talking about. The quality of what we would like to grow, and how, as a region, we could, of course, take care of ourselves and be able in a position to export to our brothers and sisters, because I think they were drawing comparison to, it was like just regular fruits. Sometimes when you think about the fruits that we grow, in our various countries in comparison to what comes out of the United States from time to time, just the quality, the taste, the texture, all of those things, if we pay attention to it, play a role in sometimes us even becoming sick because our stuff is natural, and I'm sure whenever I go to Jamaica, I can tell you, and I go to a restaurant and I ask for a fruit platter, I can tell you everything is grown in Jamaica, and then of course when you go to America and you ask for a fruit platter, you can tell this is something that came out of a can. So I would say that the conversation was one that was spirited. I think it was really about how do we move the conversation forward, how do we look at what possibilities there were for export within the region, and how what that would look like at some point, though, because at this meeting these were just the speakers and various delegates. So there's a lot of information. I stand to be corrected that there was actually a motion that we would come back to have this discussion with more depth with the various premiers, prime ministers, and what have you, because again, it is a great concern, and it is something that needs to be dealt with more sooner than later. And quality was definitely one of the major components, because again, you can have the quantity, you can have a quantity of garbage, speaking frankly, that doesn't mean anything, and it won't benefit anyone. But to have quality coupled with quantity, and thinking about what that looks like for us as a people, I think that we need to be more intentional in that aspect.
Definitely. Well, Honorable, it's been a pleasure speaking with you tonight. Thank you for sharing, I think, some very valuable information. I also just want to say a quick shout out. We have viewers all over tonight. Real quick shout out to Brenda Mitchell from Nicaragua, Davana DeVoe viewing from Turks and Caicos. We had Cayman Islands on tonight, as well as greetings we got from New York and Bermuda. And I know many more will tune in later on to view the show after it's been originally aired. So I thank you again for viewing and tuning in. And please share the information. If there are any topics or guests you would like to see us interview, feel free to drop us a message on our Facebook page as well as our YouTube channel. Like us whenever we have a show schedule, you'll see an event pop up and you will have that information and get the reminder. Again, thank you to our media partners, Cayman Marl Road Facebook page, Montserrat ZJB Radio, Virgin Islands CBN FM 90.9, Bermuda's Channel 82, Radio Saba, PJFE FM 93.9, and Barbados' CBC Channel 8. On behalf of our co-hosts, myself, Shirley, and Chris, who wasn't able to be with us tonight, but I know he's tuned in. We thank you for tuning in to another episode of Territories Talk, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you. Have a good evening.